Hey, Mama. Welcome to Marketing Without Socials for Moms. I'm your host, Andria Singletary, daughter of the king, wife, mama of two, and visibility strategist for moms who want to make social media optional. When I'm not grabbing the 100th go-go squeeze applesauce for my kids, you can find me curled up on the couch with a homemade chai tea latte and a good book. So tell me, have you reached the point in your business where you are done with social media burnout and ready to make social media optional? Are you consistently posting reels and carousels and showing up in stories, but sporadically signing new clients? Or maybe your season of life has drastically changed, meaning you have less time to show up on socials to grow your business. Trust me, I get it. I have been in each of these scenarios at some point in my business journey. It wasn't until I started leaning into marketing strategies outside of social media that I started having more predictability in my sales and growing my business in a way that supported my current season of life. And I want that for you, Mama. Each week, I'm giving you the inside scoop on how to increase your visibility and sales through podcasting, email marketing, and collaborations. All right, Mama, now grab your coffee, notebook, and pen, and let's dive into today's episode. Hey, Mama. So talking a little bit more about podcast rebranding. So should you just change the podcast name or do a complete podcast rebrand? So I wanted to share 3 signs it's time for your podcast to get a refresh, get a rebrand, different things like that. And things to consider, whether or not to just change the name or do a complete rebrand, as well as give you an example of a client I'm currently working with to do a full rebrand and how we came to that decision to rebrand her podcast. So the 3 signs that it is time for you to change the podcast name and just do a complete rebrand. So changing everything. And this is speaking to, the mama who her podcast is part of her business, is part of her marketing strategy, all of that. So 1, you've done a complete pivot in your business and no longer speaking on the same topics or to the same audience. This is huge. If your podcast is part of your lead generation and marketing strategy, you want to make sure that the content you're creating is speaking to your ideal clients. So if you've switched things in your business, then you got to switch things with the podcast. Another sign is that your growth is stagnant despite doing all you can to grow the podcast. So part of, that stagnant growth is there could be a disconnect with your audience. So the podcast name may not clearly communicate who your podcast is for and what it's about. And not even just the podcast name, there could be other assets. So the podcast description, whether or not you're using the right keywords and everything. But I always like to start with the podcast name because when people are scrolling and looking at new podcasts on their phone, the first thing they see is the cover art. And so if they see that name on the cover art and it doesn't make sense to them, it doesn't capture their attention, they're not going to click on it to learn more or explore more to see whether or not that podcast is for them. So that literally in and of itself can stunt your podcast growth. It can keep you stuck with where you're at and not seeing that growth that you desire. And then the last thing is that it no longer feels aligned with who you are or you've outgrown the name. So that's kind of what I hinted at in yesterday's episode when I was sharing behind the scenes of my podcast rebrand. A big part of it was the change with my business, but also just kind of outgrowing that stage of, being a newer mom in business and everything. And so I was no longer really speaking to those types of things that would be relevant to a new mom in business. I was speaking to other aspects of running a business that you experience as you're further along in this journey and everything. And it just, the Mama Turned Mompreneur name for the podcast just no longer felt aligned for me. And so those are some things that you want to consider, like with your podcast and everything. If it doesn't feel aligned, if it doesn't make sense for where you're currently at with your business and everything, then let's change it. Change the name, do a complete rebrand and everything. And so kind of speaking to that, when do you just change the podcast name or do a complete rebrand? So I would say this, if it's just that you're experiencing that stagnant growth, I would just change the podcast name. It could be that you're still speaking on the same topics, but the name just doesn't necessarily make sense. It's not calling in those ideal people and everything. But if you've done a complete pivot in your business and you need to pivot your podcast to get it in alignment with your business, then you have to do a full rebrand. I'm talking new cover art, new name, new intro, new outro, new podcast description, all of the things. You want to do a complete rebrand so that way your messaging is clear. You're calling in those people who, you're trying to attract and everything. And one of the things I'll say is too that when you do a complete rebrand, you will see a drop in your listeners because essentially those people who they were there for what you were speaking on before. And if the new direction you're going in isn't relevant to them, they're not going to continue to listen. And that's okay. You will find your new people. You will grow your audience with the right people and everything. But I did want to give that heads up because sometimes people can get a little freaked out like, oh my gosh, I'm losing all my listeners and everything. But you have to remember if you've pivoted and now the topics you're speaking on are no longer relevant to your audience, they're not going to continue to listen. So to kind of give you an example, there's a mama that I'm working with inside of the Social Detox Accelerator who we are going to be rebranding her podcast. She's relaunching her business, launching new offers and everything. And we had to have a heart to heart because she really loves her podcast as it currently is. But I told her, I was like, you do not have time to waste. We are not doing a podcast just for kicks and giggles. You want to do this podcast to generate leads and convert people into your offers. And so you got to get this podcast on board with your business. So where the podcast currently is at, it's not in alignment with your business. It's not going to call in those dream clients and everything. And so we're going to be going through that process of completely rebranding. And one of the concerns she had was like, well, if I rebrand it, am I still going to be able to, have fun and show my personality and stuff like that? And I think she was feeling more so this way too, because this podcast, she really wants to use it as part of her business. And so she worried that that could impact things. And so I told her, I was like, you still want to show up the same way you show up on your socials, in your email marketing and different things. You want to show up that way on your podcast too, because your personality, your values, your beliefs and everything, you sharing that is going to call in your ideal clients, those best fit people. Like I mentioned in yesterday's episode, those MVPs, those most valuable pairs, as Kay Hillman likes to say. But you have to do that rebrand in order to get everything in alignment. She's a mama too. She has a few kids. She works part-time too. And it's like, you do not have time to waste or to play around or to just have a podcast to have a podcast. We need this podcast to support your business. We need this podcast to generate leads, to nurture and convert your listeners into your offers. And so we have to get it in alignment with your business. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm so excited for her, just this new direction for her business and everything and the things that she's going to be doing. But that kind of gives you a taste too of some of the things that we do inside of the Social Detox Accelerator. Not every mama who joins the accelerator is in the same spot. I have a couple of mamas who are fresh spanking new to podcasting. They literally just launched their podcast. And then I have other mamas who are seasoned, who have been in it for a while and everything, but they're not seeing the results that they want to see. And then I have another mama who she's had her podcast for a while, but it wasn't in alignment with her new business direction. And so we have to do the rebrand and everything. And so what I really love about the Social Detox Accelerator is that I'm literally able to meet you wherever you are. And so that's why I do a mix of one-on-one calls and group calls, because the one-on-one calls, we can focus in on your specific needs. And then the group calls, you get to learn, those things like podcast SEO and how to plan your content around your offers, what you need to be actually saying in your podcast content that's going to lead to those conversions and those other aspects of podcasting and email marketing that you need to know, but also getting to hear and learn from others in the group who maybe they have a strength in one of those areas that you don't have a strength in, or they're able to bring in a fresh perspective and different things like that. Like that's one of the things I really love about group programs is getting other eyes on your business and getting other people's perspectives and expertise and different things like that. I'm just thinking about a mini mind I participated in last month. And although me and the other person who were in this mini mind, we were in different stages of business as far as like what we were working on and focusing on, we were able to give insight into each other. We were able to share fresh perspectives, and she ended up being like one of my ideal clients and was able to give me a lot of great market research. And then I had worked with people who would match her ideal client, and I was able to kind of share some insights I learned and everything. So I know that's kind of like a tangent and everything, but I just wanted to share that. Like, I love that group aspect, being able to both get that individualized support and that group aspect. And that's why I structured the Social Detox Accelerator the way that I did, because I knew that with podcasting, people will be in different stages, and to be able to structure this program in a way to literally meet you where you are and really help you achieve your goals is just chef's kiss. That's all I can say. But yeah, that was kind of it for this episode. Just sharing a little bit more about like, when do you actually rebrand and things to consider when, you want to rebrand your podcast, or whether or not it would actually make sense just for you to change your podcast name. Sometimes you don't need to do a full rebrand. Like, if the audience is the same, if the topics are still going to be relevant to that audience, you do not need to do a full rebrand. You can just do a name change. Like, so that would just you essentially be updating the name in your podcast host and updating your cover art. That's pretty much it. But yeah, that is it for this episode. If you are interested in learning more about the Social Detox Accelerator, applications for the April 2025 round are open. So head on over to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/social detox to learn more, submit your application, all of the things. Like, y'all, this program is so good. Like, it's so good. But anyways, I will catch you in tomorrow's episode. Like I said, we got daily episodes coming out. So make sure you tune in each day, because these episodes are so good. The questions I got and I'm answering, so good. All right, Mama, I'll talk to you later. Hey, Mama. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to hang with me. I would love to keep the conversation going. So head to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/marketing without socials to join my email community. I share even more tips and strategies for building a business that doesn't rely on social media and one that fits your current season of life, as well as more behind the scenes of mom and business life. All right, Mama, that's it for today, but I'll catch up with you again next week.